Trigger warnings. Safe spaces. Who do these spoiled, privileged, snowflake millennials think they are? In real life, they can't be shielded from uncomfortable thoughts. When I was their age, and blah blah. You've heard this before, and maybe even agreed with it. The thing is, post-traumatic stress disorder is indeed a real condition, and more people suffer from it than you'd think. It not only impacts war veterans, but anybody who has suffered trauma in their past. Sights, sounds, smells, even something they read on Twitter can take them back to the trauma. Hi, I'm Howard Lovy, Managing Editor of the Alliance of Independent Authors, and you're listening to IndieVoices, where I talk to indie authors about their work. Today, we're focusing on a serious subject, so I'd like to issue a trigger warning here. We will not go into any graphic detail, but today I'm featuring an author and ALLi member who wrote a series of books, Broken Pieces and Broken Places, about coping with the fact that she was sexually abused as a child, and who now hosts chats about sex abuse on Twitter. For the most part, I'm going to be quiet now and let my guest tell her own story.
I'm Rachel Thompson, and I'm an author and book marketing expert. I grew up in the Sacramento area of Fair Oaks, which is a small little suburb, and my folks had just moved up from the San Bernardino area, which is in the Inland Empire. My dad was working for a drugstore chain that's pretty well known out here in California, although they no longer exist. They were called Long's Drugs. And he was a manager with them, an assistant manager, and he took a lateral transfer because he just wanted to get us out of the smog. And Northern California was growing. It's pretty, and you know, he had my mom and two girls, my older sister and I, and he just said, you know, I don't need the promotion. I just want to get out. And he just was, you know, they were really happy to be in an area where they felt like it was safe and it was suburbia. So where I lived, where my parents bought a home, there was just a ton of new construction, and there were just very few neighbors. We probably had 6 or 7 neighbors on our street, and then going down was just all new construction.
Rachel was 11 years old in the summer of 1975. It's California, so the temperature was very hot.
The people who lived next door to me had a pool, and it was a family of about 5 kids and a mom and a dad. And the mom stayed home. The dad was in the military, but he was home a lot. And the mom, I didn't know this at the time. I was only 11 years old. She had some mental issues. And so we just really didn't see her very often. So my mom said, you know, why don't you go make friends with the girl next door? She's in your grade. And it was summertime. And I was, you know, going to be going into whatever, 6th grade, I guess. 6th. I guess. And so, you know, I went over and said hi, and she said, you know, hi, and we just sort of hung out a little bit. And her dad seemed kind of weird, but, you know, just kind of quiet and staring, and totally unlike my dad. My dad was just like this kind of nerdy, cool, mellow dude, right? And then next thing you know, he's taking the kids, all of the kids in the neighborhood on scooter rides, and, you know, hanging out with us at the pool. And eventually, you know, it came to pass that he would take me on a scooter ride, and he would spend more and more time with me and, you know, do things to me that were not acceptable, that a dad would not be doing. And I'm not going to go into explicit detail, but it was obviously, you know, he molested me. And he did this several times over the course of the summer. I didn't understand what was happening. I was 11. I didn't even have the language to discuss what was happening to me, to my sister or my parents. And I had a baby sister at that point. And he threatened me. You know, he was in the military. He had a gun. He made me hold it in my hand, and it was very heavy, especially for my little small hands. And he threatened both me, my sister, my baby sister, who I loved more than anything. She was like my little live doll. And if I said anything to anybody, you know, he would kill me or my family. And my room faced out to the street. But he would tell me that he would come over and look in my room at night. Whether he did, I didn't know or not. But I was terrified that he was going to do something. And my baby sister's room faced up to the fence on their side of the house. And he made a lot of threats like that. So I, of course, was just absolutely mum about the whole thing.
Why didn't she tell an adult? Well, he threatened her family, and because there was a certain way he was grooming her that made sense to an 11-year-old child.
I knew that the only way if I was going to be able to go in a pool on a 107 degree, for example, summer day, was that I would have to go through the machinations of being around him. So I could play with my friend Margie. I could go, and I could go in their pool if I let him touch me in some way. And it doesn't make any sense. And eventually, of course, I avoided going over there completely. But it's like, giving candy to a child. The kid will take the candy regardless of what they have to do to get it, because that's how an 11-year-old's mind works. And it doesn't work like an adult's mind. So for us, we would reason through it and say, this is wrong. And of course, I knew it was wrong, but I also didn't understand how to make it right. So, and I was terrified to tell anybody because he told me that if I told anybody, he would kill me or he would kill my sister. And of course, I didn't want that to happen.
It turned out Rachel wasn't the only one this man was molesting. He was caught. There was a trial, and Rachel testified against him. His sentence? 18 months. So eventually he was back at home, and Rachel was forced to see him almost every day through high school. But for a child, the aftermath was guilt.
When we come forward with it, we think we're in trouble. We think we did something wrong. And as we grow up into adults, we carry that with us for so long. And that stayed with us for so many years, even though logically, as adults, we say, well, why didn't you come forward? Why didn't you say anything? And I haven't even written about that part yet, Howard. I think that's probably going to go into my next book, is that I thought I was in trouble.
It wasn't until decades later, in her 40s, that Rachel could go back and begin writing about her past. It started when she heard about the suicide of an old boyfriend. Then the words started flowing.
Something like a death of somebody very close to you or who you used to be very close to you. I mean, I truly did love him, even though we didn't work out. It can be a turning point in any person's life, particularly for a writer, because we carry so much in our heart and in our brains, and at some point we just need to get it out.
A challenge from a friend convinced her to start writing and healing.
The true impetus for me was a writer friend of mine had started a blog where he said, it's just going to be letters to whomever you want it to be. Why don't you write a letter to the child molester or the pedophile next door? And I said, no, I can't do that. And he said, well, why not? And I said, well, I could do it, but I don't think I'd want to share it because it would just be so angry and vitriolic. And he said, so what? Just do it. A lot of people do that in therapy. And I had started therapy, and I talk about that as well, when my daughter was born, and she's almost 19 in a couple days. And I actually had gone into a deep depression after she was born, which is not uncommon for new mothers, but I was able to recognize that it was because I felt I couldn't keep her safe, which was directly related to what had happened to me, particularly having a girl. So he and I got to talking about that, and he said, well, maybe that can go into your letter. Maybe use it as a therapeutic kind of exercise, and, maybe just don't even send it. And I thought, oh, all right, Dr. Gabe, okay, I'll go ahead and do that. And it took me about 6 months to get in the right frame of mind to do that. And during that course of that 6 months is when D, is how I refer to him, he had committed suicide, killed himself. And so it was this whole course of events that all of this occurred. And I wrote the letter, and it maybe took me 10 minutes. Once I set my mind to do it, it just came out. And then I had a friend of mine edit it, and she said, I wouldn't change a thing. It's great how it is. And so that's really how that all came to be.
By that point, Rachel was already a published author. She had written lighter, satirical books, but with the breakthrough in discussing her abuse came her books Broken Places and Broken Pieces. Rachel is also an expert in book marketing, so she knows it's not enough just to write a book. With her Twitter Talk sex abuse chat, with the help of trained psychologists, she regularly takes questions from those who want to talk.
I started Sex Abuse Chat in 2013, and I had released Broken Pieces, which is the first broken book, in 2012. And, it was really interesting because I put it out there. It was really not part of my quote unquote branding, my author branding, which was more about fun. And, I had written 2 humor books. As I said, they were just a satirical take on the silly things that women and men do. And one was called A Walk in the Snark, and the second one was called The Man Code Exposed. And it really was just satire. It was just fun. I had written quite a bit of this on my blog. And like I said, they did quite well. This was when KDP Select had first started, and the pool was really big, and my books sold quite well. And it was great. It was fun. And then, my ex-boyfriend killed himself, and then I wrote the letter to the pedophile, and just all these feelings started up, and I started into recovery. And obviously that sort of all changed. And then I released the book, and I decided to go self-publishing because I had already self-published my first 2 books, and I had an editor, I had a graphic artist, I had a formatter. I had my whole professional team in place, and I knew that if I was going to self-publish, I was going to do it professionally. I wasn't just going to do it cheap and on the fly. I put a few $1,000s into each book, and I released the book, and I thought, I might lose my audience because it's very different from what I had written, but I'm just going to go for it. And I thought, we'll see what happens. Well, the response was just overwhelming. People came to me from all over the world, emailing me, DMing me, PMing me with their own stories of being sexually abused. But they didn't want to tell anybody else. They didn't want to share it publicly, but they wanted some kind of I constantly was asked, can you create some kind of forum where we can all get together and talk about it? And I thought, well, how am I going to do this? And I was on a chat. Bruce Sallin is a wonderful man. He created Dad Chat. And so I started talking to him, and I said, what if I did some kind of sex abuse chat? And he's like, well, it's kind of difficult because it's such a revealing sort of subject. And I said, yeah, but the point of putting my book out there was to take away the shame. I don't feel shame about it anymore. I'll talk about it. People can ask me about it. And he said, well, that's how you feel about it, Rachel, which is wonderful. But so many other people may not feel that way. And I said, okay, that's fine. They can gawk. But I really want to have a psychologist do it with me, because even though we're not I'm not a psychologist, and I never claimed to be one, I would definitely want to have that kind of a viewpoint from somebody who is. So eventually I connected with Bobby Parrish, who is a psychologist, and she is trauma trained, and she's also an incest survivor. And then her personal and professional life just became so busy that we parted on great terms. We're still good friends and collaborate on lots of different, advocacy efforts. And I brought in 2 other gals. One has a master's degree in social work, and the other has a master's degree in education. And so that's C Streetlights is the education coordinator, and then Judith Staff, who's based out of England, is the social worker. And so they are my alternating co-hosts. And we are still there every Tuesday night at 6 o'clock Pacific time.
Rachel's books about abuse all begin with the word broken. I asked her if she still thinks of herself as broken.
I think to answer that question is there are moments where I still have flashbacks every day. They just come up, but they don't break me down. It's not like I'm laying in a ball on the floor. They come up and I just keep going. I do have occasional triggers, which I write about in Broken Places. And sometimes they hit me and I don't realize. You don't know what a trigger is going to come up and how it's going to affect you or how you're going to react to it. I do know that I'm thriving. My business is doing amazing. My kids are doing well. I have a wonderful man in my life. And so for the most part, I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic that things are going well. And I have no issues saying that, I have anxiety and depression. The meds help me amazingly. I have chronic migraines that I get Botox injections for. We talked about that. And, there are daily reminders, but that doesn't mean that I can't thrive. It doesn't stand in my way. So this piece is called Aftershocks, and it's in Broken Places, and it's one of the most popular pieces from the book. My beautiful man, strong, sexy, musky, masculine. I take him in. He holds me to him. I'm enveloped, lost in where I want to be. Nothing was amiss, nothing that I could feel anyway. I know my way. And then memory punches me with brutal force, and I stop. I move. I float away. Baby, he asks, and I barely hear him in the fog of the thick clouds surrounding me, memory drowning out his voice, no longer feeling his warm skin against mine. He is my anchor, my protector, but even he cannot navigate his way over this jagged road. Not because he won't try, because he will. Not because I won't allow it, because I do. It's because I don't know. I don't see it yet. The flashes of terror, swerving tendrils passing my periphery, target practice, a near miss, a direct hit. My body, a tight ball of numbness. Neither of us knows how to recognize it. Like children in a foreign land, we instinctively huddle together to solve a problem we haven't figured out yet. I cannot find my way. I retreat into sleep without letting him hold me. It kills him, but he gives me that. Tears in the morning, holding the messy shame of the 40-year-old memory right there in my open hand for him to see. Flesh and hair, genitals and lips. The human body is pretty much the same for us all. It's only the experiences that change us. He holds me now as I cry, apologizes for not seeing, for not knowing. It's okay. I didn't know either. It's not your war to fight, I say. I get lost sometimes. I've traveled this road for decades, and I still don't know how to go. I am a wanderer traversing mountains of time. There is no fault, only fault lines that tremor and quake, barring me, no warning. Aftershocks. I tremble as I calm, breathing restored, working my way back through time's icy fingers, realizing it will always be there, waiting in the shadows. This battle, I know my way.
And now it's time for the news with ALLi News Editor Dan Holloway. He's a writer, a poet, a performance artist, entrepreneur, and as always, I learn something new about him every time we speak. Now I find out he's not just a marathon runner, but a special kind of crazy, an ultramarathoner. Hi, Dan. Good to talk to you again.
Hello. Hi. Good to talk to you.
So I'm fresh out of running metaphors, so I'll leave those up to you. How far are you going to run and why?
Well, I ran 50 kilometers last weekend, and then next weekend I'm going to be running for 24 hours. So it's a timed race rather than a distance race. Mm-hmm. I hope to run about 135 to 150 kilometers in that time. It feels not very far in 24 hours, but I'm sure when I'm there it'll feel like a lot longer.
24 hours, is that, are you going around a track? I did a 24-hour run in my life back in college, and it was like 24 hours around a high school track, and it was very boring.
It's a 9-kilometer loop, so it's not quite as boring as running around a track, but it's still really, really tempting and really possible just to stop at any point.
Right.
So that's the psychological battle, is not to stop when it's really easy to stop.
Yeah, I have an 83-year-old father who runs ultramarathons, and he'll probably outlive me. But what I will say is that I find running relaxing and great for creativity. I usually get my best ideas while I'm running. The problem is when I sit down to write afterwards, the ideas are just gone. I need to somehow run with a recorder. So stay hydrated. That's my only advice.
Thank you. So what have you been up to recently?
Well, I've been working for the last few years on a Jewish-themed memoir. And I used to write about Jewish issues a great deal about 15 years ago. And I stopped for a little while because I just got into other things. I started writing about technology and business and science and then publishing. But now I'm getting ready to build, hopefully, an audience for the memoir. And so as part of that, I'm launching a Jewish-themed podcast on Patreon. And I'm excited about it. I've done the interviews, and now I'm working on production. And hopefully I'll have it done by the end of the month. I'll read excerpts from the memoir, and other authors are going to read from their books. But, we're going to cover some issues of interest to the Jewish community, and we'll see what happens.
That's super. So what do people pay per month or per item? Or
they'll pay per month for the low price of $5 a month, and it'll be a sort of a proof of concept for me. I've been told that it takes about 6 months for these things to really take off. So I'll see if people are going to support it. If not, I'll do it anyway because it's something I'm enjoying doing. Yeah. I'm thinking of it more of an audio documentary style rather than talk Q&A, but we'll see how it works out.
Excellent. I shall look forward to it.
So I'll let you do your news report now, but I'm wondering if a certain writer for Forbes magazine is now in the witness protection program, hiding from angry librarians. Tell us what happened.
Well, there was a very interesting story that went up on Forbes that basically made the case that we should get rid of libraries, and instead of libraries we should have Amazon bookstores everywhere, because they did exactly the same thing. They offer much better value for money, of course, and that was basically it. And this wasn't a very popular article, needless to say. It got a lot of publicity from librarians, but also from writers, from readers, from basically everyone, wondering if the author had ever been in a library.
Right.
Knew the first thing about what libraries do.
Or what librarians do.
Yeah, they teach people computer literacy. They're the absolute center of any community they're part of, in a way that Amazon possibly isn't. That leads us into Amazon. And Amazon have very much been at the front of the news this month, largely because it was Amazon Prime Day on July the 16th and 17th, I think I'm right in saying. They've redefined a day as 36 hours this year. I think their days were 30 hours last year, and this year it's 36 hours.
I guess if you're Amazon, you get to do that.
You do, yes. Yes, they probably have drones that go around the world very quickly to that happen.
Right.
The main news from that seems to be that within a couple of hours of starting, the servers crashed. And instead of getting fabulous product deals, customers logged in and all they could see was pictures of Amazon staff's dogs saying, "We're sorry."
So another reason why Amazon will not replace your local library.
Well, yes, it was. I'm sure it was a very successful day, but it was a little bit farcical.
So tell me, what's the thought behind it? Everybody just get on Amazon all at once and crash the servers and buy a bunch of stuff?
Yeah, that's the non-conspiracy version.
Okay. Well, tell me the conspiracy version.
No, the conspiracy version is almost certainly not true. It was just something. This was the day of the Trump-Putin summit, and as I'm sure listeners are aware, there's a certain animosity between the president and Jeff Bezos, and there's also
I've heard.
and the summit didn't. It wasn't an unfriendly affair, and there's the whole whether or not Putin might have any influence over people who are particularly good with computers, and whether these three facts could be lined up too.
Oh, okay, all right. So they're not going with the our election was hacked by an overweight kid in his mother's basement anymore, right? Now it's all Jeff Bezos' fault.
So, but I think it's much more likely that Amazon just don't have a clue how many servers they need.
I find that with most conspiracy theories can be explained by incompetence rather than conspiracy.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
What else is happening in the world of indie publishing?
Some good news is we have new partnerships with both Smashwords and Publish Drive, which Smashwords is sort of the oldest, and it's sort of, I think as indies we feel slightly fondly towards it, even if we don't actually use it anymore as our publishing platform, because Mark Coker's such a great advocate of indie authors. They have now partnered with a new magazine called Romance Daily News, and that will be featuring Smashwords books as recommended choices on a daily basis, as well as having bestseller lists based on all the sales of Smashwords books in the various outlets to which it distributes. So that will be interesting. That's a nice touch. And they've always done best with their romance authors. So I think that's probably quite a good move to focus in on that.
Do you publish on Smashwords still?
I have a couple of books there that aren't in KDP Select, but they're books that have been there for the best part of a decade now.
Right. Okay. But not romance. I'm assuming you're not a romance writer, or maybe you are.
I have a romance pseudonym, and I have a couple of titles, but they're not on Smashwords.
Oh, you do really?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did not know that. That's cool. You know, another new thing I just learned about you. You're a romantic. So.
Certainly, I'm certainly a romantic with a small and large R. so that's an interesting thing. And Publish Drive is the other interesting one. Publish Drive are one of the more forward-looking of the distribution platforms, and they have partnered with Dong, who is a Chinese retailer. So that will enable all their authors to have access to the Chinese market, and that's quite an interesting move. It'll be interesting to see if this is the start of Smashwords becoming more of a niche, focusing on the romance, whereas other platforms are looking to go wider and wider.
Well, they seem to be among the best-selling self-published titles, aren't they?
Yeah.
Romance novels?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Readers and writers of romance have always been at the forefront of the indie movement. They've suited ebooks much better than a lot of other genres because people just read so much.
Okay, well, I'll let you go now. I want you to get a lot of rest,
and a lot of
drink
running.
lots of liquids, and I think you're supposed to carb load either the day before or 2 days before. I've heard various things. You have to have a spaghetti dinner a couple days before, I think.
Yeah, and basically when you're running, you just eat all the time.
Okay, well, good luck. Hopefully you'll be back next month.
I certainly will.
And what to tell us about it. Okay.
Super.
All right, thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much indeed.
You've been listening to Indie Voices with me, Howard Lovy, Managing Editor of the Alliance of Independent Authors. Find more author advice and tools at our Self-Publishing Advice Center, selfpublishingadvice.org. And, if you haven't already, we invite you to join our organization and become a self-publishing ally. You can do that at allianceindependentauthors.org. Now, what are you waiting for? Go write and publish.